Katharine, the Duchess of Kent, has passed away at the age of 92. Buckingham Palace releasing a statement confirming she died at her home in Kensington Palace.
As the royal family quietly prepares for the solemn farewell of Duchess Katharine of Kent,
Duchess of Kent.
Catherine, the Duchess of Kent.
Catherine, the Duchess of Kent, has died. She was 92 years old.
Catherine Worsley, a Yorkshire woman through and through, joined the royal family when she married the late Queen's cousin, the Duke of Kent.
an unexpected twist has emerged that's capturing worldwide attention. King Charles, already burdened with the weight of tradition and responsibility, is now facing her final request. One written in her last will and testament, carried with a sense of urgency. This isn't just a simple matter of inheritance. It's something deeply personal, emotional, and potentially controversial. As the funeral arrangements unfold, Charles's decision could forever alter the legacy of the monarchy. A royal farewell, the Duchess of Kent's faith. The corridors of Kensington Palace, often filled with the quiet hum of royal activity, were recently wrapped in an almost sacred stillness. It was here that the royal household confirmed news that struck the very core of the monarchy: the passing of its oldest and most dignified member, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Kent. The announcement came on a Friday, accompanied by a deeply touching detail. She slipped away peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. This moment, tender yet heartbreaking, revealed not only the fragility of life, but also the warmth and devotion that followed her until her final breath. At the age of 92, the Duchess of Kent left behind a legacy carved out over nearly a century of resilience, loyalty, and quiet strength. Her life spanned remarkable transformations, both within the monarchy and the wider world. Wars were fought and won, empires reshaped, monarchs crowned and mourned, traditions tested, and new generations ushered in. Through it all, she carried herself with grace, never demanding the spotlight, but instead becoming a steady presence whose story was interwoven with the monarchy's own evolving history. Her passing, though sorrowful, has shone a light on one of the most intimate and significant aspects of her journey: her steadfast faith. Unlike many of her contemporaries within the royal household, the Duchess of Kent was a devout Catholic Christian. This detail alone may appear small, but it holds immense weight in a royal institution historically bound to the Church of England. For centuries, the monarchy and the Anglican Church were inseparable, their fates intertwined. Yet here stood the Duchess, quietly breaking a precedent that had lasted for more than 300 years. Her decision to embrace Catholicism was not made hastily. It was the result of deep reflection, long consideration, and unshakable conviction. Those closest to her recall that her faith became a defining part of her later life, shaping her beliefs and guiding her choices. And it is precisely because of the strength of that conviction that she took care to articulate her wishes for her final rites and funeral. These wishes, deeply rooted in her spiritual journey, are now being carefully honored by the very family she devoted her life to supporting. To truly grasp the weight of this moment, one must also understand her place within the royal circle. The Duchess was not a distant figure tucked away in the background. She was the cherished wife of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Kent, cousin to the late Queen Elizabeth II. This connection gave her the honored role of being aunt to the current monarch, King Charles III. Such closeness naturally carried with it a sense of obligation, respect, and loyalty. And now, in her passing, it is Charles himself who bears the responsibility of ensuring her wishes are fulfilled with the dignity they deserve. The palace, through careful communication and reporting by royal correspondent Danielle Stacey, has already confirmed that the Duchess of Kent's funeral will indeed be a Catholic service. This is not merely a matter of protocol or planning, it is a statement. a recognition of a deeply personal choice that once set her apart and in many ways reshaped the narrative of royal faith in modern times. Danielle Stacey explained to Hello Magazine that the Duchess's conversion was not an impulsive decision. Rather, it was a long and considered journey, one she finally completed in 1994. That year now stands as a milestone in royal history. The first time in over 3 centuries that a member of the royal family openly embraced Catholicism. A quiet, yet powerful challenge to the centuries-old traditions that bound the monarchy to the Anglican faith. By doing so, the Duchess of Kent didn't just step into a new religious identity. She redefined what it meant to belong to the royal family in an age of changing values and shifting cultural landscapes. And now, with her passing, the monarchy finds itself navigating both the grief of losing a beloved family member and the delicate task of honoring a spiritual conviction that once stood at odds with its very foundations. But what if her final request carried more than just religious weight? What if her carefully expressed desires hold secrets, promises, or even challenges meant to shape the future of the monarchy itself? That brings us to the next chapter, the wish. Could this wish, made in her final days, reveal something the palace has not yet dared to share? Stay with us, because what comes next may leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. But was her decision merely an act of private devotion? Could her choice in 1994 carry more significance for the monarchy today than anyone dares to admit? Keep watching as we reveal the details. How the Duchess of Kent changed royal history. The announcement from the palace that the Duchess of Kent's funeral arrangements would reflect her own carefully expressed wishes revealed more than a simple adherence to protocol. It spoke volumes about respect not only for her position as a cherished member of the royal household, but also for the deeply personal beliefs that guided her through the long arc of her life. In this gesture lies the quiet acknowledgement of something profound, that even within an institution rooted in centuries of unyielding tradition, there remains space to honor the unique spiritual path of the individual. For many, this respectful decision also raises a deeper curiosity. Where did the Duchess's profound conviction come from? What compelled a royal, who could so easily have blended into the expectations of her station, to make a choice that carried such historical weight? The answers can be traced back to her own voice. Years ago, Catherine, the Duchess of Kent, gave a rare glimpse into her spiritual journey during a candid interview with the BBC. In that conversation, she spoke not with pomp or flourish, but with plain, heartfelt sincerity. She admitted that what drew her most powerfully to the Catholic faith was its sense of clarity and order. "I have always wanted that in my life," she confided, describing her appreciation for a faith that laid out clear expectations. For her, it was not about rigid restrictions, but about having a compass, a guide she could lean on. She elaborated further with striking honesty. "I like to know what's expected of me. I like being told, 'You shall go to church on Sunday, and if you don't, you're in for it.'" Though simple in wording, this statement offered a window into her heart. It was not about fear or constraint. It was about her yearning for structure, for a clear path she could follow with devotion. For her, Catholicism represented not only a system of belief, but a home for the deepest parts of her spirit. In that sense, her decision wasn't casual or experimental. It was the outcome of a profound desire for stability, guidance, and meaning. But this choice did not exist in isolation. It carried with it a powerful historical resonance. Since the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and the subsequent Act of Settlement in 1701, the British monarchy had been bound tightly to the Protestant faith. For more than 300 years, monarchs and those in direct line to the throne were not permitted to be Catholic, nor to marry one. These restrictions tied the crown directly to the Church of England, ensuring that spiritual and political power would remain aligned. Even as recently as 2013, the monarchy wrestled with those rules. That year, reforms were made to allow heirs to marry Catholics without forfeiting their place in the succession. Yet even today, the reigning monarch must still be Protestant and in communion with the Church of England. Against this backdrop, the Duchess's decision to convert in 1994, while not threatening the succession itself, since she was not in direct line, stood as a deeply symbolic moment. It was not rebellion, but it was quiet defiance. It was a signal that, even at the heart of one of the most tradition-bound institutions in the world, the pull of individual conscience could not be denied. This act of personal conviction shines even more brightly now as King Charles III takes steps to honor her in death as she lived in faith. By ensuring that her funeral will be a Catholic service, Charles is doing more than granting a beloved aunt her wish. He is showing a monarchy capable of compassion, of inclusivity, and of bending when the moment calls for it. His choice acknowledges that personal belief, even when it runs contrary to centuries of tradition, deserves reverence. In today's world, where institutions are constantly questioned for their relevance, this moment reveals a monarchy that can adapt without losing its essence. It demonstrates that respect for personal faith can coexist with the crown's foundational ties to tradition. And in doing so, it casts the Duchess of Kent's story not as a quiet footnote, but as a meaningful chapter in the ongoing evolution of the royal family. Her conversion, once private, became unavoidably public. It spoke of courage, of resolve, and of a woman determined to follow her truth, even if it placed her at odds with the weight of history. That her funeral arrangements now reflect this same journey is fitting, an act that tells the world her voice is still heard, her choices still matter, even beyond her final breath. And yet, the story of the Duchess of Kent is not only about faith and tradition. She was a woman of many dimensions, often living away from the glare of constant publicity. Known for her gracious manners and her deep love of music and the arts, she carried herself with quiet elegance, supporting charitable causes and living a life of service without seeking recognition. The palace's decision to respect her religious convictions may be striking, but it is just one part of a larger portrait. Let's take a deeper look into her personal life. Could this side of the Duchess reveal truths even more surprising than her historic conversion? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover may turn everything you thought you knew on its head. The Duchess of Kent's untold journey. History often remembers the grand stages, the glitter of crowns, and the solemn echo of ancient rituals. But sometimes it is the quiet choices of one individual that reshape the very foundations of tradition. The Duchess of Kent never sought headlines, never raised her voice in rebellion, and never courted the kind of drama that usually swirls around royal lives. Yet by following her conscience and embracing a path few could have predicted, she carved out a legacy so profound that her final farewell is not simply a ceremony, it is a turning point in British history. Her funeral at Westminster Cathedral will forever be remembered as the day tradition and faith collided. And for the first time, the monarchy allowed the boundaries of centuries-old customs to bend. But how did a woman once viewed as merely a quiet consort transform into the central figure of a funeral that has already made history? To understand that, we must begin long before the headlines, long before the controversy, back to her earliest days. Catherine Lucy Mary Worsley entered the world on February 22, 1933, at Hovingham Hall, her family's sprawling estate nestled within the rolling hills of Yorkshire. She was the youngest child and only daughter of Sir William Worsley, the fourth Baronet. Her childhood was steeped in the traditions of English aristocracy, yet unlike many who grew up in such privileged surroundings, Catherine's upbringing didn't isolate her from the simple realities of life. She was raised among the countryside, surrounded by community, and grounded in values that emphasized sincerity rather than grandeur. Marriage to royalty was never her destiny, or so it seemed. Yet fate had other plans. In the late 1950s, her path crossed with Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, first cousin to Queen Elizabeth II. Unlike the whirlwind romances splashed across newspapers, theirs was a connection that grew quietly, away from flashing cameras and gossip columns. It was a love built in silence, nurtured with patience, and shielded from the frenzy that usually devours royal affairs. Their wedding, held on June 8, 1961, was a spectacle of both history and tradition. Taking place in York Minster, the first royal wedding there in more than 6 centuries, it drew thousands into the streets and captivated millions who followed the event through newspapers and broadcasts. On that day, Catherine stepped onto the stage of royal life, her name forever bound to history as the Duchess of Kent. In the years that followed, she seamlessly blended into her new role. She became a reliable presence at state events, a supportive companion to her husband, and a familiar face to the public. Perhaps most famously, she became synonymous with Wimbledon, beginning in 1969, when she first presented trophies to champions of the game. Her gentle smile and composed warmth became part of the tournament's identity, remembered by players and fans alike. Yet beneath the crown's shine, Catherine was never content to exist only as a ceremonial figure. Away from the cameras, she nurtured a deep love for music, teaching, and connecting with ordinary people. She was not a royal who locked herself away behind palace gates. Her heart was drawn to the everyday, to classrooms, and to the quiet joy of sharing art and song. By the 1970s and 80s, she was not only recognized as a dignified royal consort, but also as a devoted mother to her 3 children, George, Helen, and Nicholas. To the public eye, she appeared to embody tradition itself. But in the private chambers of her soul, something else was quietly taking root. For more than 3 decades, the Duchess carried out her duties with steady grace. She smiled, she waved, she supported charities, and she stood as a figure of continuity in a monarchy that thrives on ritual. To many, she was the image of stability. Yet behind the polished facade, a deeper current stirred within her. A quiet but powerful spirituality, one that would one day lead her down a path that no one in the royal family could have foreseen. And it was this very path that began to separate her from the scripted life of tradition, guiding her into choices that would forever change how history remembered her. But what happens when a duchess, born into privilege and bound to royal duty, turns toward simplicity instead of splendor? How does she embrace simple life? And why would such a choice unsettle the monarchy itself? Stay close. The Duchess who turned silence into history. When Catherine, Duchess of Kent, chose Catholicism, she did so quietly, without fanfare or speeches. Yet in that stillness, she set in motion a change that shook centuries of royal tradition. Her conversion wasn't loud, not rebellious in tone, but it carried consequences that echoed far beyond palace walls. In that moment, she stopped being seen as just another consort at the side of a duke and became something much greater, a woman whose deepest convictions would ultimately define her legacy. And then, after the world reacted, Catherine did something even more remarkable. She stepped away. Slowly but deliberately, her public appearances dwindled. By 2002, she had formally stepped back from her style of Her Royal Highness, signaling the end of her duties as a working royal. While most royals cling to titles, Catherine quietly laid hers aside and walked into a new chapter. She chose not the grandeur of palaces, but the modest setting of a classroom in Hull, where she introduced herself not as the Duchess, but as Mrs. Kent there, She taught music to children who had no idea of her royal status. To them, she wasn't a figure from history books. She was the teacher who helped them find rhythm, courage, and a sense of belonging. That choice, simple on the surface, was groundbreaking in meaning. Royals were meant to remain distant, set apart from ordinary life. Catherine dissolved that invisible wall with humility and grace. And she went even further. In 2004, she co-founded Future Talent, a charity dedicated to helping young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was a perfect reflection of her values, a fusion of music, service, and faith. But Catherine was never afraid to show her humanity. She opened up about her struggles with depression, a rare admission from a royal, and she carried the pain of losing her child in 1977 with honesty rather than silence. These moments of vulnerability made her relatable, stripping away the polished mask of monarchy and revealing a woman of depth, resilience, and extraordinary strength. Through it all, her faith never wavered. She attended Catholic services privately, avoiding the spectacle of cameras and ceremonies. For Catherine, belief was not about words, it was about action, about living her truth in quiet consistency. That steadfast devotion explains why her funeral carries such weight. The Catholic rites at Westminster Cathedral are not just ceremonial. They are the natural conclusion of a life lived authentically, without compromise. By the summer of 2025, Catherine had long retreated from the public gaze. For over 2 decades, her life at Kensington Palace with Prince Edward revolved around family, faith, and the occasional charity endeavor. Friends described her as serene, with music and prayer shaping her days. And then, on the night of September 4th, her life's rhythm came to a gentle end. At the age of 92, Catherine passed away peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by loved ones. The news, announced by Buckingham Palace the following morning, was delivered in simple yet heavy words. The oldest senior member of the royal family was gone. Instantly, the nation mourned. Across Britain and beyond, newspapers carried her story, from Yorkshire aristocrat to royal bride, from Wimbledon's royal box to Hull's modest classrooms. Yet the mourning soon deepened into history. Within hours, the palace confirmed what many had not expected. Her funeral would be held at Westminster Cathedral, marked by a full Catholic Requiem Mass. A farewell rooted in faith, service, and subtle defiance, this was more than tradition, it was meaning. But what hidden weight does such a service hold for a monarchy once severed from Rome? Stay tuned. Don't miss what comes next. The funeral that redefined the monarchy. In the long sweep of modern royal history, nothing quite like this had ever unfolded. Newspapers lit up with bold headlines, their words carrying the weight of centuries. A historic farewell, declared one. Another, more dramatic announcement. The first Catholic funeral for a royal in centuries. The coverage was relentless, and for good reason. Britain was still adjusting to the reign of King Charles III, and now, before the nation could fully settle into one change, another was already redefining the monarchy. Catherine's funeral wasn't just a farewell, it was a marker of transformation. What was once unthinkable is now openly embraced. A duchess who had quietly chosen conscience over conformity back in 1994 had, in death, reshaped royal tradition itself. The tributes reflected this monumental moment. King Charles and Queen Camilla spoke warmly of her unshakable faith and kindness. Prince William and Princess Kate highlighted her lifelong devotion to music, education, and community service. Even Prince Harry, who so often distanced himself from palace matters, sent heartfelt condolences. The public responded in kind, with a mixture of grief, admiration, and awe at the significance of what they were witnessing. The announcement recast Catherine's entire legacy. She was no longer merely remembered as the Duchess who withdrew from many royal duties, or the royal who quietly taught in a classroom, or even the Catholic convert in a Protestant dynasty. Instead, she became something greater. The Duchess, whose very funeral had written a new page in British history. This was not just another royal ceremony. It was a turning point, a farewell that broke centuries of protocol. Catherine's journey had begun in the refined halls of Hovingham, had passed through the grandeur of York Minster on her wedding day, and had carried her to Wimbledon's iconic lawns, where she comforted champions and losers alike with quiet warmth. Yet her legacy was never about spectacle. It was about courage. The courage to embrace her faith, to face her struggles openly, and to live with humility. Her conversion to Catholicism in 1994, once seen as a minor footnote, had now become her defining act. By living her convictions quietly, but consistently, she ensured her final farewell would not be routine, but meaningful. In a monarchy so often accused of clinging to the past, Catherine proved that change could come not through grand reforms, but through one woman's truth. Her funeral was not rebellion, it was authenticity, a reflection of the life she chose, and a reminder that even the oldest institutions are moved by sincerity. And so, Catherine's farewell wasn't just a funeral, it was history unfolding before our eyes. But what other hidden choices of hers still shape the monarchy today? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.